Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny, and this is my review for the Chronicles of Death Row, which was this documentary special that came on BET, and it was six episodes. But man, I had to do a review on this because man, there was so much that was revealed about the rise and fall of Death Row. And I've watched other documentaries about Death Row, but this one really had me at the edge of my seat, and I love the way they did it because they really showed how at first Death Row had great intentions, but then due to all of the smoke and mirrors, it lost its path, and the guy who started it all, marrying Suge Knight, how he had a genius plan, but then got caught up in the glare and everything just crumbled, as far as the whole company, and even Suge Knight's life even, went down in terms because he's currently in jail right now. So we literally see in this 6-part series, how Death Row, rose from obscurity to become one of the most dominant hip-hop labels in the game, to going bankrupt. But then not only that, the life of Marion Suge Knight went bankrupt as well. So the way they started off, they said if you really want to understand Death Row, you have to understand the creator, Marion Suge Knight. Suge Knight came from a good, upbringing, growing up in Compton. He pretty much had both his mother and his father in his life. They taught him good morals and values, discipline, and, his father taught him about the streets. Even though he wasn't a banger, he kind of knew what the streets was all about. And he said that, look, after a while, he said at first Compton used to be a great neighborhood. People would mow their lawns and clean their cars. It was a very, suburban environment. But then it's like overnight, through the crack epidemic, everything changed, and it just became a war zone. And he ends up playing football, and ends up getting a football scholarship to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and he says he attributes his mentality and the way he thinks to his father and his uncles, because they taught him that he had to be tough, and that if somebody knocks you down, you get back up. And also, one of the lessons he learned in football is that, learning how to be a team, and that, and that you actually need a team to get victory. And also that if someone knocks you down, you get back up, and if someone tries to knock you down, you knock them down. So he literally was learning some of these very deep principles that will later play on into what he does with Death Row. And we also find out that while he was in college, he ends up shooting a friend, and at the same time, he had a deal with the 49ers on the table. But after that whole situation, the 49ers, pretty much said that they weren't going to work with him because of the violence. So here it is, he had an opportunity to play in the NFL, but lost that opportunity. But the way Suge thought, he says, okay, if one door closes, another one opens. So I decided in my mind, I'm going to be my own boss, and I'm going to try to get into the music business. And he talks about how his father was the most hardworking man that he knew. His father at first was a janitor at UCLA, then he got promoted to being a truck driver. He said his father always worked, but he barely had 2 pennies to rub together. So he said he kind of learned early then on that you're either going to work all your life and not make anything, or be your own boss, and there's no limit to how much money you can make. Which is something I definitely identify with because I'm an entrepreneur myself. Oh yeah, also check out my website. I'm actually a senior associate with Legal Shield and ID Shield. Definitely check that out, and if you want information, you can definitely reach me on my social platforms. But, this was just gold to me, because this is like, okay, he had great intentions, and he had a great foundation, that he wanted to be his own boss, and he wanted to build his own corporation, his own empire. he didn't want to work for somebody else. He wanted to be his own man, and he wanted to create opportunity for others. Because at the heart of Suge, you kind of saw that he really did have great intentions. You know, he wanted to help people, and you know, and pretty much what he ends up doing is that in 1988 he ends up becoming, you know, the bodyguard for Bobby Brown, and supposedly there was these guys who wanted to put a hit on Bobby Brown, and he was afraid to go on tour because I think Bobby had owed them money, but they wanted to kill him. So Suge pretty much stomped the guys, you know, they settled it, and he said it kind of got aggressive, but after that, you know, the reputation of him being a stand-up guy started to spread throughout the industry. And then we actually meet, you know, and then they also talk about his infamous dealings with Vanilla Ice, you know, with the producer Chocolate, who said that he actually helped wrote and produced the song Ice Ice Baby, as well as other works on the album. I think it was called Play That Funky Music. Yeah, I think that was the name of the album. Chocolate actually says that at first they were trying to get him to sign this ghostwriter deal for $100,000 one-time payment, but he wouldn't be able to earn any royalties or residuals off of his work. So he brought this to Suge, and Suge was like, "Oh hell nah, you know, you ain't signing that deal. We're gonna get this, and you're gonna get what's properly due to you, and we're not gonna take anything less." So they actually talk about, you know, some of the infamous tales of how he took, you know, how Suge took Vanilla Ice out to the balcony and made him look over and said that, yeah, it's a long way to fall, and that's what's gonna happen if you don't sign over the rights to Chocolate, you know, for the song. And then, you know, Vanilla Ice even said in the interview that after a while, Suge would just appear everywhere he was at. Suge was always there. Suge was tailing him. But then, you know, Chocolate pretty much puts the myth that, no, we was only there for a short period of time, and it wasn't this big urban legend, but yet the urban legend actually helped Suge's purpose, and it literally created this mythology about Suge. But Chocolate said that, look, we sat down there with Vanilla Ice. He said that, look, we can either make this 15 minutes or we're going to be here all night. But yeah, we're not leaving until you sign over, you know, the publishing of Chocolate, which eventually he did. So we pretty much got the tale of that. So here it is. We had the whole situation with Bobby Brown. We also had the situation with Vanilla Ice, which is building Suge's reputation as being a man that gets things done, but also a man that's about, you know, making sure that these artists get what's due to them, because, you know, they try to cheat a lot of artists out of their publishing. They try to get them these ghostwriter deals where someone else is making money off the song, but the person who created the song never sees a dime of that money. So I'm already here with Suge, like, wow, that's definitely a good way to go. That's definitely a good way to go, but along the way, Suge was doing a whole bunch of sinister shit to get, you know, he was doing a whole bunch of sinister shit to get into the game. One of them being involving Dr. Dre. You know, Dr. Dre, you know, one of the best the best hip hop producer of all time. I mean, he's probably one of the producers of all time, period, as far as all genres of music. I mean, this guy is a creative genius. Literally, I would say Dr. Dre is like the Quincy Jones of hip-hop, because that's exactly what he is. I mean, this man knows music, and he knows how to put great music together. He knows how to, you know, that he can take anybody and put them in the booth and can make a hit. Like, he just has that magnetic ability. And we definitely know him being a part of, you know, NWA and Ruthless Records. He was one of the people, along with Eazy-E, that helped set up Ruthless Records, and he was also the producer. So he was working with all the great talents, you know. Like NWA, Michelet, and, you know, many other many other acts that were on Ruthless Records that were doing big things. And the thing is, Dre was the producer of all of this music. I mean, I would say it was like 15 million plus sales in all of those songs Dre produced. So here it is, you know, you got Eazy-E, Jerry Heller, and Dr. Dre was supposed to have been like a triumvirate for Ruthless Records, but along the way, you know, that began to change. And they say it was because, you know, Jerry Heller was saying that why not me and you be the business heads and just keep Dre where he is. So Dre literally was like an employee, you know, of a company that he helped establish. Because if it wasn't for his talent and if it wasn't for the writing of Ice Cube and DOC, Ruthless Records would have never happened. So pretty much what ends up happening is that, Dre realizes he's being railroaded. You know, they're pacifying him and shit. But then he finally goes to Suge and he's saying that, look, you know, I'm producing all this music and I barely got two nickels to rub together. Like, they said that Dre had a mansion with nothing in it. Like, if you were to start a fire, nothing would burn because there was nothing inside the house. Like, he literally was living in an empty mansion. He didn't have a lot of money. And the thing about it, you know, he brought this up to Suge. And Suge took matters in his own hands. And legend has it that he kind of, you know, used force. And he pretty much used a force tactic to get Eazy-E to sign over. Because, you know, the Doc was also involved in this as well. Like, him and Suge were close, and he was saying that, you know, we should start a label together, but, you know, Doc was like, look, we ain't gonna be able to make this work without Dre. So he pretty much came to Dre and let him know that, look, I can get you out of that situation, and you can actually, you know, you can actually have more control over your destiny, and there's more money to be made at the end of the day, and you don't no longer have to be victim to this bullshit that's going on with Ruthless, because he did sign a contract. So, but then he also mentions that, you know, that Ruthless wouldn't even give him a copy of his contract. So what Suge does, he and his goons go to the lawyer. They muscle up the lawyer. The lawyer literally peed his pants and gave him the contract. And then they found out that him, Michelet, and the DOC, they were literally getting paid like 2 pennies per album. So that was the deal. So Dre was pissed when he's like, man, I fucking produced all of this damn music and this is all I'm worth to y'all? So yeah, Dre was already like, yeah, fuck them. I'm one out of this shit. So what Suge supposedly ends up doing, he ends up going to Eazy-E, and yeah, he ends up going to Eazy-E, and supposedly they rough up Eazy-E, and under duress he signs over Michelet, Dr. Dre, and the DOC. He lets them out of their contracts, and they later on go to establish Death Row. But that actually comes back to bite them later on, because due to the fact that he was signed under duress, you know, Jerry Heller, you know, ends up getting this, because, you know, Eazy-E wanted to kill Suge Knight. Like, he made it known that he was going to kill him, but Jerry Heller talked him out of it. Because, you know, people said that, you know, Eazy-E may have been short in stature, but he was all brute at heart. He was not the type of person that was going to take disrespect lying down. He ain't let his size did not stop him. You know, he was that type of person that if you cross me, I'm going to fuck you up. And that's exactly the kind of person Eazy-E was. So we actually end up finding out also in this episode, and I knew about this, about Michael Harris, a.k.a. Harry O, him being involved, you know, in the actual startup of Death Row, because we met him through, Suge met Harry O through David Kenner, who pretty much was the attorney of Death Row, and he was a criminal attorney. he was the one who brought Suge to Harry O, and Harry O decides to invest $1.5 million in this new hip hop label, which was supposed to be called GF Entertainment / Death Row. But later on down the line, they messed over Harry O, completely created a different company, and pretty much swindled him out of his money. Because Harry O was in prison, for trafficking as well as murder. So he pretty much was was behind bars, but was still conducting business and running business behind bars. That's G right there. And definitely, what I do know of Michael Harris, I mean, he is the one that actually helped Denzel Washington's career, because he actually produced a play called Checkmates, which was Denzel Washington's big break in Broadway, and it actually helped make him into the star that he is today. So Michael Harris, aka Harry O, pretty much helped, launch Denzel Washington's career. And also, he was also one of the people that actually helped fund the Apollo. So the Apollo was still running and is still, doing big things because of Harry O's investment in that. So Harry O was definitely a strategist and was very smart, but he was a big-time drug dealer, but then he also had some legal ventures as well. So he invests money into into shit starting up Death Row. They pretty much had this big party. I think the name of the place was called Chandre's. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But it was this big, elusive club in Beverly Hills where they had the launching party. And Harry O said that he pretty much was involved step by step in the launching of Death Row. But after it got set up, he was pretty much pushed out of it, and they literally stole his company right from under him. So they also talk about, they actually talk about the blueprint of Death Row, which was Dre's album, The Chronic. Dre did the producing, but there was a hidden ingredient that made The Chronic a success, and it was none other than Snoop Dogg. He actually talks about, because Snoop Dogg was a part of a group with Warren G and Nate Dogg, and they all kind of grew up around each other, and they were into music. And Warren G is Dr. Dre's brother. He brought him a tape, and he said that he was fascinated by it. He wasn't completely like. He said that he really wasn't, he said he wasn't like overly excited about it, but he said that he knew there was something there, and he definitely loved Snoop's rap. And he said that when he saw how people reacted to Snoop's rap, he said that I got to work with this guy because Snoop has something different. Most of the hip-hop artists at that time would holler, when they were rapping. Snoop was very laid back, very real, very grooved. Very chill. And Snoop has always been that. And, Snoop pretty much, along with Dr. Dre, they worked, because Snoop, as well as DLC, did pretty much the writing, for The Chronic, and Dre did the producing. And I think Dre was only on 4 tracks maybe. But the whole album, this was, Dre, introducing Snoop to the world. So, The Chronic became this multi-big success, but before The Chronic could even happen, there were a lot of companies, they were trying to get a distribution deal, nobody would work with them. Nobody would touch them because Suge had developed his reputation, and then after what happened with Eazy-E being attached to Ruthless Records, and him having all these connections in the industry, nobody was working with them except for Interscope, Jimmy Iovine. So they went to Jimmy Iovine, and even Suge says that that Interscope was about to go. They were like weeks away from going into bankruptcy before he met them. Before he met Jimmy Iovine, and he said that when Jimmy Iovine, he says, I've heard all the stuff about y'all, but play the music. He played, Ain't Nothing But a G Thing. He said it reminded him of Satisfaction. It had that kind of impact. So he decided. So at first, Suge had said that Jimmy Iovine wanted his artist, and he was like, "Oh no, we're gonna own the masters. We're not gonna be the ones that's gonna be working and performing, but yet all you guys make the money. This is modern day slavery. We ain't going for that." So, due to the fact that they wanted Dr. Dre mainly, because Dre was by this time he was a well-known producer and was known that everything that Dre touched turned to gold. Dre had the Midas touch. They wanted Dre, but Suge had Dre, so because of that, they made the deal with Suge, which actually got the Chronic out there, which actually helped solidify them, as far as Death Row. And then, another thing was that once Harry O, once after that launch happened, Harry O was pouring a whole bunch of money into establishing Death Row. But then now that the Chronic was now going to be released and it became a platinum hit, I definitely remember the Chronic. I remember that being like, yeah, that was the blueprint for Death Row, and that was the album that was gonna spurn not only many albums following that, but also new artists and new careers. So that was the gateway to making Death Row what it was. But then another thing that Suge talks about is that Death Row were not. He said the person that was the most important to Death Row, even more than Dre, was Snoop. Snoop was the first major artist on Death Row. Because Dre had already had a track history being with Ruthless Records. Death Row was the starting point for Snoop. And Snoop was their first major artist. He kind of was like the Mary Wells of Motown. Mary Wells was like the first breakout artist of Motown. Snoop was the same thing for Death Row. He helped put Death Row on the map. And the crazy thing about it is that, with the anticipation of Doggy Style, and I remember when this happened, he was, he pretty much had charges of murder that he was fighting. Murder was the case that they gave him. And I remember all of that going on. I even remember when I used to watch that video, Murder Was the Case. They used to play it late at night because of the lyrics as well as the subject matter. So, I would watch it at night, and I remember me and my brother at first, we couldn't watch it because we were really, because hey, he's talking about, this whole fight between God and the devil and all of that. So it used to scare us, especially when the guy did the big eyes, like, when he had like those, he had like the white eyes and everything. That shit used to freak me out when I was a kid. I was like, But then later on, my mom explained it to me, so then after a while, it didn't scare me anymore, but at first it did. I couldn't watch that video for a minute. As a matter of fact, the first time I watched it, I didn't go to bed. I literally was staying up like, my ass ain't going to sleep, because all I'm hearing in my head is, murder was the case that he gave me. But it was a great song, though, but unfortunately, that was Snoop's life at that time. Here it is, he's this groundbreaking artist, is about to put out his debut album because he's already known by this time as being, a part of Dre. And, also, they also talk about the song that him and Dre did for the movie Deep Cover. Cause it's 187 on an undercover cop. I love that movie with Lawrence Fishburne. Love Deep Cover. It's a good film. And the song played in the beginning of the movie as well as through the movie and at the end. So that song became a big hit. And, that also was Snoop's, debut. But then he even had even more of a debut with the Chronic. But now he's going to have his own debut with Doggy Style. And I remember that Doggy Style album. That was the shit. But, but the song, I think, also what made that first album as big as it did was because that because that Snoop was dealing with this real life situation where where him and his bodyguard could be facing life in prison and possibly the death penalty for murdering this Clinton I think his last name was Walter Marion, but if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But yeah. So here it is. Snoop has two things going on: the rise of his solo album and the rise of him becoming a star, as well as a murder charge. And another great thing that I liked about this, and Dre even says that the foundation of the Chronic was funk, funkadelic in Parliament, you start thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, that's what's up. That's why it rocked, because you literally had funk gave birth to hip hop. So when you think about George Clinton, you think about funkadelic and them lowering the mothership down and he's rising up, I mean, like, you can't get no better than that, man. Like, because funkadelic, I rocks to that, and I definitely grew up around it because my mother was a big George Clinton fan. She even talked about when she went to go see him at Arcade Stadium here in D.C. She and her friend were like smoking a blunt in the crowd, and she put it up for Clinton to get it. George Clinton hit her blunt and then gave it back to her. So she told me about that growing up. Like, yeah, she definitely was a lover of funk, and we see how funk gave birth to hip hop. And Dre knew this, and Dre literally put funk throughout the Chronic, and we see that Snoop understood this as well, because he also brought that same element to Doggy Style. To Doggy Style. I'm sorry, I said Doggy Style. I'm with the huggy homie. Anyway, but then we also see that Snoop, helped bring other artists to the game too, being Corrupt and Daz, because Corrupt, when he was on What's My Name and when he did Doggy Dog World, he was only 16 years old, and we've seen how successful Corrupt has been over the years, and Corrupt is still doing this thing. And Corrupt even talks about how Suge set up Death Row with all these other artists. You had Rage, Michelet, REX, all of these, the Dog Pound. You literally had all of these artists all in one space, and he talks about how it was kind of like a gladiator sport. Everybody's hungry. Everybody wants to get their name out there. Everybody wants to get their music out there. But Suge talks about how he ran the company like a football team. We're going to eat together. We're going to play together. We're going to work together. We're going to do everything together. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to win. So I thought that was genius. So here it is. You got the triangle. You got pretty much Dre. You pretty much got Suge Knight, who's the business head. You got Dre, the producer. You got the star in Snoop Dogg, because Snoop literally became a movement in and of itself, and Snoop is still doing big things today, especially with Martha Stewart. I mean, everybody loves Snoop. I mean, Snoop always had that likability. Even then, white people just love Snoop because Snoop is very chill. He's laid back, but he will clap at you if you come at him wrong. Don't excuse the laid back for weakness. He's sharp, and when you really piss him off, oh, trust, it's enough to kind of be like, yo, you don't want to fuck with that. Like, seriously, that's how Snoop comes off. But Snoop is always real chill. He always laid back, and he says that, yeah, and he lets it be known, I'm the one that brought the Chronic. They'll tell you. Yeah, because we know Snoop like to smoke that good shit, so ain't nothing wrong with that. But so yeah, you had all of these elements, with Snoop Dogg being the first big star, on Death Row, which actually brought out other artists like the Dog Pound, Rage, rocking her stuff with her Afro puffs. You had all of these other artists that literally began to take shape, and Snoop was kind of like the door breaker. He broke down that door, for Death Row and put Death Row on the map. So then after Snoop's success, there were many, successes after that. So Death Row literally was like the mainstream hip hop label, and they were making big money. I mean, Suge even mentions in this documentary that he actually got over about $150 million in its first year. That's huge. And then they said that, the top of the pyramid, the person that he knew he had to have was Tupac. So they literally take 2 episodes to really discuss Tupac, because Tupac was such a phenomenal talent. Not only was he a talent as far as music, he was a talent as far as acting, as far as writing, as far as producing. I mean, pretty much, Tupac was that diamond that he wanted, and if he had Tupac, that will literally take Death Row into a higher stratosphere. And it did. Once after, Pac was going through all of his legal troubles, and, after he had got shot at Quam Studio, and that pretty much, broke the friendship that he once had with Notorious B.I.G. and Diddy. And, due to the fact that, because he was an artist on Interscope, so he was on Interscope way before Death Row was even an idea or a thought. So he was already with Interscope, but by this time he racked up so many different legal cases, and he was like $4 million, like in the hole, because of all of this legal stuff he was going through. Interscope pretty much didn't really want to work with him anymore, because it was like they were more losing money than gaining money, because he had all of these legal matters, coming against him. But then a lot of it, I think, is because of who he was and his upbringing. Remember, Tupac's mother, Afeni, was a Black Panther who pretty much was targeted by the FBI. So, trust me, I think, like, Pac pretty much they pretty much had an eye on him from day one through his mom. So she talked about how they moved around a lot, and at one point she had got addicted to drugs, and when he went out to Marion County, that's when he got discovered, and he started becoming a background dancer for Digital Underground. But they said that, like, every town they went in, when they would do a club, they would let Pac steal the show. So that's how Pac became known throughout the country, because even though he was a backup dancer for us, through these club dates, we would let him touch the mic, and he began to build an audience. So then he ends up getting signed with Interscope, and has pretty much his first 2 albums are platinum hits. So he's doing a big thing until he gets this charge, with supposedly raping, sodomizing this girl. And pretty much, Pac was also the type of person that was really trying to end this gang-on-gang violence. He was really trying to bring people together. And one person that he hung out with in New York was this gangster named Haitian Jack. And Biggie knew who Haitian Jack was, but he was kind of warning, Pac, I don't think you should be hanging out with these cats. They play by a different set of rules. So pretty much him, along with Haitian Jack, were arrested, on accounts to this girl being raped at this hotel room. Pac, on the other hand, wanted to fight for his rights, so he didn't take a plea, whereas Haitian Jack did. And because Pac was kind of going out, pretty much kind of putting it out there that Haitian Jack was like a sellout. Definitely this upsetted people in Haitian Jack's camp. So that shooting at Quam Studio supposedly was some people who were affiliated with Haitian Jack, but Haitian Jack said he never put out a hit on Pac. But he said, I'm beloved in New York, so the fact that he said those things, he pissed somebody off and they wanted to take me out. They wanted to take him out. But he blamed Biggie and Puffy for that. So from that point on, the tie was severed. So here it is. He ends up getting convicted for the rape charge and was given, I think, like 4 years. So here it is. He's in jail. And it was Suge Knight who pretty much gave him, because I think his bail was set at $1.4 million. So Suge pretty much takes personal meetings with him, and he pretty much draws up a contract that, that Pac will give him 3 albums, as a form of bailing him out. So Pac signed the deal, and even Afeni said that, yeah, he should have taken the deal, but they took unfair advantage of Pac. Because even though Pac was successful and was making all this money, all that money was not trickling down to Pac like it should have. Because that's one thing they also touch in here too, that the bookings and the actual books or whatever, things weren't adding up. Here we are thinking that all these artists were being equally paid, and that all of these artists on the roster were millionaires. That wasn't the case. So once he gets Pac, he now has the pyramid all together, because Pac had that it factor. He was not only, a great artist, but he was also a movie star. So I can definitely see that, yeah, probably the next step for Death Row was that they were going to start producing their own movies, and creating their own movies. I mean, the sky was the limit with Death Row. But we see that due to a lot of the treacherous dealings of Suge Knight, this all came back to bite them in their ass. One, what he did with Harry O, and Harry O even said that, look, Suge is the reason for his own demise, because instead of him being a businessman, he was out here wilding out in these streets, beating people up and doing stupid shit, instead of actually running $1 million business as a potential $1 billion business. Instead of him focusing on the business, he was focusing on trying to manage the streets and manage his credibility. But he says the streets are unmanageable and the streets don't love nobody. So you were fighting a war that you were going to lose anyway. So we had that going on, but then we also saw that there were gang affiliations with both of Bad Boy as well as Death Row. The Crip, you pretty much had the Bloods that were aligned with Death Row, and the Crips were working with Bad Boy. Puffy said he never actually deliberately hired Crips, but there were Crip connections, and one of them was this guy, Keefy D, who later on explains that about Pac's death, that Orlando Anderson was his nephew, and that it was actually Orlando Anderson who fired those fatal shots that eventually killed Pac. That it was Orlando Anderson, and that he was in the car that night when that happened. So that was kind of mind-blowing to me, like, wow. And I can see that situation playing out, that is a strong possibility, that the reason why Biggie and Pac's deaths were never solved was because they were pretty much gang-affiliated deaths, and you know how the gangs are. No snitching. But then there was a lot that went down that led to that point. But, so here it is, you had all this, great success that Death Row was having, for all of it to go down in scandal. And for all of it to just completely dissolve after Pac's death. And we even seen like beforehand, Dre wasn't loving the environment. He wasn't loving this whole East Coast, West Coast thing. He just wanted to make music. And then he couldn't even work in his own work environment because there was too much gang shit going on. Niggas fighting, niggas shooting, and he said that when he saw an engineer get beat down because he was wanting to take too far, he was done. So he pretty much wanted out and went to Jimmy, and Jimmy pretty much decided to make a deal with Dre. But then Suge was like, well, yeah, but if he leaves, he only leaving with the shell on his back. And he said, and he pretty much kind of said in this thing that, you know, I ain't never seen a hoe that left her pimp, and the pimp said, okay, take your jewelry, take your clothes, and take it, and oh yeah, don't forget the money. And he says, we know at the end of the damn day, Dre ain't nothing but a hoe. And I was like, whoa, that was cold. So here it is, you used Dre to get this thing off the bat, but you never really saw Dre as your equal. So now that was discussed, and this legend had it that yeah, Dre walked away from the Death Row catalog, but yet he's probably making 4 times more than he is now. But then that's that part of that money that he will never get. But Dre was like, look, sometimes you gotta leave money on the table, you know, because at the end of the day, what he wanted was peace of mind, you know, and but then they also say legend had it that Suge pretty much intimidated him to give up his masters. But he walked off, and you know, we see the legend that Dre has created after leaving Death Row with Aftermath. You know, Eminem, Kendrick Lamar. I mean, he's still doing big things, you know, even as of right now. So Dre, I think, made the smart move. You know, he got up out of there and he decided to build his own foundation. And he said that, look, you kind of learn, it's just like with Dre's case, he kind of learned the industry somewhat the hard way. He got in, he got railroaded by Ruthless, then he ended up getting railroaded by Death Row, but now he knows the business better, and now him and Jimmy Iovine are working close together. You know, now Dre's a billionaire. So, hey, shout out to Dre. He made it work. So we saw that go on, you know, and you know that, you know, Dre ended up leaving, you know, before Pac was killed. And then you even had Dre saying that I could have been in that car right there with them, and it would have been a totally different story. So, a lot. So he said that, hey, I dodged the bullet by getting out when I did. So then they actually show that after, and they also mentioned Michelle and Dre's relationship, how, you know, they kind of tapped into, like, you know, how Dre was battling alcoholism, and she said that was when he was very abusive when he was drunk, you know, but she said that most of the time when he was sober, he wouldn't put his hands on him. But, you know, she talks about how eventually, you know, her and Dre broke up, and then later on her and Suge ended up getting together because we know that she has a son with Dre and she has a daughter with Suge Knight. And, you know, and then she kind of said that, you know, like, you know, she would visit, you know, Suge in prison, and she was one of the people that was helping to run Death Row while he was incarcerated. Because what ended up happening is that after Pac's death, you know, Suge gets arrested because he violated his probation when he jumped in the fight with Orlando Anderson at the MGM, you know, and legend has it is that, you know, due to the fact that Pac jumped on Orlando Anderson, that's what led to him being killed that night, because Orlando wanted revenge. And they were saying that, you know, first of all, somebody should have been protecting Pac, and somebody shouldn't have let Pac jump on him like that. But hey, Pac was that kind of person that whatever he did, he did. Whatever he said, he meant. He didn't take shit back. That was just the kind of person Pac was. But Pac should have been protected that, yo, you just can't be jumping on these kind of niggas, because these niggas live by a different code of rules than you do. I mean, even though Pac knew the streets, he didn't know that he was signing, he probably didn't know he was signing his death certificate by doing that. But Pac kind of knew that he was going to die young. I mean, one, because he was a black man in America and he was outspoken and he wasn't going to shut up. I mean, if anything, Pac was our generation's Malcolm X, and I can honestly say I agree with that 100, because I love both Pac and Biggie, but Pac had definitely grabbed me more not that I dislike Biggie any less, because I love Biggie. I'm a big fan of both of them, but I was more of a Pac fan because he was speaking some truth about the black race and the black experience, and where we as black people have to elevate ourselves and think higher of ourselves. We're more than what they say that we're more than what they tell us who we are. We're better than that. So I definitely related to that. But then, yeah, we see that after Pac dies, how the company falls apart, how Suge's life falls apart, to the point that, what happened on the set of Straight Outta Compton, on the set what happened, and then they also discuss what happened, on the set of Straight Outta Compton, when he was supposed to be there to meet with Dre. They're supposed to have a discussion or someone kind of make peace. But then we saw that Dre's bodyguard Bone walked up to the car. Supposedly he had a gun. So what Suge ends up doing is that he backs up the car, he hits Bone, but then ends up killing the guy Terry, who was a good guy, who was a friend of Suge's, and was the one who was trying to get the two of them to kind of like mend their beef and kind of squash it and actually build something different. He ends up running over Terry, and Terry ends up dying. So pretty much he's being charged with manslaughter and murder. So it just goes to show that, look, it was kind of karma. Suge did make a lot of enemies. Suge did rub a lot of these people the wrong way. There was even legend that one record producer, for 12 years, every day he walked around with bodyguards because he was afraid of Suge that much. I mean, he instilled that kind of fear in the music industry. And then we kind of saw there was a clip where Wendy Williams was interviewing Suge, and she was saying, so you got a lot of people afraid of you, and he says, well, I don't look at it as fear, I look at it as respect. So yeah, but respect and fear walk a very fine line, because if someone fears you, they're going to do everything they can to get rid of you. So we kind of see that's what they're doing now with, bashing him in the press, making him look like he's this monster. But personally, I don't think Suge is a monster. I just think Suge was a guy who had good intentions, but got lost under the glares of fortune and fame. And that's how I would define it. So that was my take on it, y'all. If I missed anything, put it down in the comments. Or if you got different things, if you got some things to share about this whole, death row story, put it down there. I'd love to hear from you. But subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so you get notifications every time I drop a video. Also, follow me on all of my social platforms, as well as my website for ID Shield and Legal Shield and ID Shield. Definitely check out my website, and also follow me on all of my social networks that are listed in the description box. Also, like this video, comment on this video, and share this video. This is a great documentary. You probably can find it on BET.com, or if you have cable, you can get it on demand. I suggest you watch the Chronicles of Death Row, because it will teach you the good, the bad, and the indifferent of going into business, and how to, and pretty much it's also an inspiration that we as black people, we can do anything we set our minds to. But be careful, because with ego and with intimidation, you can lose everything. So that's what I have. So until next time, everybody, take care.